the broadcast. So we are currently live on YouTube. So hi everyone. We are currently live on YouTube. We are not starting for another 4 minutes, but I am sitting here in the chat room with folks from around the world, in fact. So as people are starting to join, we're just going to leave this live and we'll start the actual presentation at 9 o'clock. But I'm going to give us a little chance to share the link out on our social media, etc. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put you on, Josh. There you are. And you guys.
How are you, Dr. Hone?
Hello.
How have you been?
Remember, it's Friday afternoon for me. This is the end. I'm nearly a day behind you in teaching and dealing with students, and I've literally just come from a lecture. So, yeah, I am okay.
I'm glad you could join us.
No trouble.
A whole new avenue for us. So, hopefully it works out. Which it's gonna. It's gonna.
Oh, of course it's going to. This is actually this is really nice because this back end where we're all here right now is the same back end that we'll have tomorrow and Sunday. So it'll look just like this. It'll stream live to the Hopin platform. So the guests will be in the Hopin platform. And one of the things I'm finding amongst everyone is they're very much thinking this is going to be like a Zoom meeting, which it's not. This single part of it will be reminiscent of a Zoom meeting, but the remainder of it is going to be a platform that encourages and facilitates interaction. So you'll be able to video chat, network with other people that are other speakers. We'll have a separate speaker room you can go into and talk to other speakers. There will be virtual museum tours. It'll be more like an interface on, let's say, an app or a video game where you have lots of different buttons you can click. There'll be a lobby, etc. If for some reason, though, I'm going to add Scott here. If for some reason you find that when you're speaking and doing anything live,
Marty, do we have another headset I could try? Maybe if I pull it out, will that just...
Oh, I'm going to mute her. She's talking about getting her headphones working. So you would want to go back to the reception area while you're in something like this, for example, because it's much like the old school radio issue. It's going to be on a bit of a delay. And if you've got your phone up and you've got your radio up, it makes a lot of feedback, and you don't want that. So when you're doing your presentation, just make sure you're not also in some other part of the meeting. All right, I'm going to share this out to everyone, and we're going to get started in literally 1 minute.
Scott?
Mike, hi.
You can hear us, Scott?
Hi.
Yeah, I can hear.
How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. I see you're in your very clean office.
Yeah.
I didn't let Josh do it from his office.
Where is he, by the way?
In front of the sign.
Literally next to her in her office.
Oh, okay.
We're pretending we're in different spaces, but
Oh yeah, I can see the plant now.
he needs the emotional support.
Now I know it gives it away. It's obviously the same thing.
She mentioned this earlier, but we've been quarantining together, so.
Yeah, so when we went out to Utah, we decided that we did not want to drive the entire way in the car with like the risk associated, plus, so at that point we did a 14-day quarantine and we've just sort of held it since then.
Pretty much.
So yeah, he gets to play with my kids and my kids get to literally see my husband, Josh.
Your husband, Josh?
Comma, and Josh.
You didn't actually say hi.
You don't say commas. All right, it is now.
Let's say commas.
Unless you're Bill Shatner, because Bill Shatner says commas.
That is true. Obama as well, I think, really says commas. It's true.
That's about.
All rightio. I am going to get the stage ready.
Yeah, I wish Heidi could get in here.
Oh, she'll. she'll be great. It'll work. All right, folks, we are live in the Student Symposium, the 9 a.m. version, and I'm so excited. Here we are at Burpee Museum, and we're trying something a bit different this year. Last year, we had over 300 students simultaneously in the room. This year, we are doing it a little differently because we are not in person. So I'd like to introduce the Director of Paleontology at Burpee Museum, Josh Matthews. He's going to give a brief introduction, and we'll start introducing you to our speakers. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, welcome everybody, and speakers, thank you for joining us this morning. As everybody is well aware, we're still in the middle of this COVID pandemic, so this is the first year we've ever done PaleoFest virtually. So this is our 23rd year doing PaleoFest. It's a bit odd not having everybody here at the museum. It's been quiet for the better part of a year, actually. And there's just a lot going on here at the museum. We got new exhibits being installed. We got new exhibits being planned for the summer, in addition to the flooding event we had recently. So it's actually relatively fortunate that we actually are virtual this year, because due to the flood we had a few weeks ago, had we not been gone virtual, we probably would have actually had to cancel PaleoFest, because the museum's in a bit of disarray right now until we get these repairs taken care of. So it's going to be a great PaleoFest this year. The interesting, or the fun part about doing PaleoFest virtually is we're not restricted to speakers from the region or the United States. We do try to get some internationally when we can, but the cost of travel, adds up really quick. So doing it virtually, we get to bring in people from anywhere across the globe, no matter where they're at, as long as they're willing to stay up very late at night, depending on where they are. So Heidi and Dr. Salisbury, we appreciate you guys joining us this weekend. And if you're live, you're going to clearly be up late in the evening because you're on such a different time scale. So again, thank you. We got a bunch of talks going on. Myself, in terms of what I do as a researcher, as the Director of Paleontology here, I'm currently finishing up my dissertation at Northern Illinois University at in the Department of Biology. I am currently working on microvertebrate faunal assemblages from the Hell Creek Formation in southeastern Montana. So the Burpee Museum.
What's an assemblage for our
kids? It's an assemblage is an accumulation of tiny little fossils that are eroding out of certain geological units. So what I do is the Hell Creek Formation is a geological unit out in southeastern Montana that represents the very end of the Mesozoic era, the latest Cretaceous, and the top of the formation is where that extinction event happened, where that asteroid impacted in the Yucatan. So we get the final stages of the dinosaurs occurring here. And so I look at microvertebrate assemblages. So microvertebrates are the small fossils that basically represent the other critters under feet of the dinosaurs. So everybody, we talk about the dinosaurs, everybody loves your T-Rexes and whatnot, but there were still other animals existing below at the feet. You had mammals, you had amphibians like salamanders and frogs, you had lizards, you had snakes, you had lots, the waters were teeming with fish and freshwater rays and skates and sharks. So these microvertebrate assemblages are where these tiny little fossils begin eroding out of the hill and accumulate in these little deposits. So when you're not looking at a 3 or 4 foot long dinosaur bones, you actually have to get on the ground and look at tiny little, look like pebbles that laying on the ground, and you pick out these teeny little fossils. And what I'm actually doing for my dissertation is I'm looking at the Hell Creek Formation. So the Hell Creek Formation is about 450 to 500 meters or feet thick out where we work. So I'm sampling the bottom of the Hell Creek, the middle of the Hell Creek, and the top of the Hell Creek. And I'm analyzing the different species, the different critters that are found in those areas, and seeing how they change throughout that last 1.5 million to 2 million years of the Cretaceous period. So I go out there, when we find fossils in the rock, still in the rock, not eroded out. When we find things eroding on the ground, then we dig into the hill and try to actually find the fossils still in the primary rock. When I do, I get burlap sacks and I just hack into the end of the hill and I collect a bunch of this sediment up in the bags, label them to where we found them, and we bring them back to the museum. I have a big tank here down in the lab that we fill up with water, and we soak these sediments, put them in sieves, like screens, different size screens, and we sort the fossils out based on their size. And then I have a volunteer down in my lab, Dana Regalar, who basically takes what's left in the screens puts them under the microscope, and he picks out these individual teeny tiny little fossils that can be, millimeters in size. So when you get things like frogs, I put things under the microscope, you wouldn't be able to think you wouldn't think these are fossils if you didn't look at them under the microscope, because they just look like sand grains or a pebble or something. But when you put them under there, I have frog jaws and frog ilia, parts of the hips that are millimeters in scale. So when we look at all these different animals together, we can get an idea of what the ecosystem looked like at this point in time, and then we can analyze those faunas through time and see how, if things are changing during that period. So that's what I'm doing for my dissertation at the moment. But I also work out in Utah. We have the Hanksville-Burpee Dinosaur Quarry. So Scott Williams is joining us today as well. He and I worked together for a long time out in Utah at the Hanksville-Burpee Dinosaur Quarry. The bone bed itself is over a mile long. We've got over 20 dinosaurs in the one quarry, mostly sauropods, but we've got a pretty diverse assemblage of dinosaurs there too. We got at least eight species for sure, maybe 9 or 10 once we get everything analyzed. So that we work in Utah, but then also again back to the Hell Creek in Montana. Homer, if you've been to the museum here before, you've seen our Triceratops Homer and our T-Rex Jane. Homer was actually my master's thesis way back when. So I spent most of the entirety of my career here at Burpee. I left for about 4 or 5 years I moved down to Augustana College in the Quad Cities, where I worked with Dr. Bill Hammer on the Transantarctic Vertebrate Paleontology project, so digging up dinosaurs in Antarctica. So I spent some time down there working.
You got a question, Josh?
I do. Well, so it's interesting. So when we're out in Montana or wherever we're looking, so most of the geological units, not everyone, but most of the geological units that we work in have been previously studied. So we know what rocks to look in now, where dinosaurs and other fossils have been found, depending on what group of animals you're looking for. So in our cases, dinosaurs and things from the late Cretaceous. So in Western United States, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, most of the Western states, and actually Eastern states as well, have dinosaur fossils. So we already know where the fossils can be found. And we take crews out in the field, and it's all about having eyes on the ground. You walk around buttes, it's very arid. There's very little vegetation. The vegetation that is like sagebrush. So it's not forests and things like that. Unfortunately, if you have forests, you're not going to see the rocks because they're covered with the vegetation. So out west, again, it's arid. There's not much vegetation where we work. So we walk around these buttes and these hills, and you look for little scraps of bone popping out of the hill. And once you know how to identify it, you'd be surprised how quickly your eye sees these things. So you see a piece of bone. If you're lucky, you can follow these bits of bone up the hill, and you might have a root popping out of the hill. Once you see that, you start digging into the hill to expose more, and hopefully there's more there. Unfortunately, I'd say probably 99 out of 100 times that doesn't happen, but it does. Clearly, there's a lot of dinosaurs that it does happen. Now, the smaller things are more difficult. Yeah.
We're going to have to, I'm not trying to cut you off, but I am going to have to, no, it's really important, but I have another really cool question, and I want to switch to our next speaker, who's Scott Williams. So I'm going to add Scott in. Howdy. I'm going to unmute you. Oh,
Hello.
All right, Scott, I am going to just transition with a question from a first grade class. And then you have the floor after you answer the question to talk about who you are and, what you like about paleontology.
Okay, works for me.
Can you see the question?
Yes, it's from Betsy Thomas. Hello, I'm a first and third grade teacher. First and third grade teacher. My students heard that chickens are the closest living relatives to dinosaurs. They want to know how a chicken can be related to a dinosaur. I bet you that Tom Holtz is needing to answer that. I figured you might be frothing at the mouth at that one. So I'll actually set it up, and if Tom wants to jump in. So the idea that dinosaurs and birds are closely related actually goes back well over 100 years. There was a scientist, a paleontologist named Thomas Huxley, that looked at fossils from different dinosaurs, primarily the meat-eating dinosaurs, and the fossil known as Archaeopteryx, which is also known as the first bird. And he noticed that there was these similarities in some of their features. In fact, Archaeopteryx has preserved feathers, preserved feather imprints, and he saw a connection. That theory didn't really gain a lot of traction. It kind of popped up here and there. Another guy named Baron Franz Nabscha, it was a Transylvanian paleontologist in the early 1900s, looked at that, and he thought the same thing, but they weren't really paid attention to. They were kind of ignored. And then in the 1960s, a paleontologist named John Ostrom came out here to Montana. He was from Yale, and he was looking primarily for small meat-eating dinosaurs, and he found a site where which is known as the Shrine now. That's the nickname for it, and it was a site where there was a small or a mid-sized meat-eating dinosaur that he collected. He named it Dinocus, and once he reconstructed and looked at it, he saw a lot of bird-like features. The bones were exceptionally hollow. The outer bone layer, which we call the cortical bone, was very thin. The vertebral column, the vertebra, the backbones, and the backbones had hollow openings for what would be air sacs. Its hip was shaped more like a bird's. It was definitely nimble. It certainly wasn't the plodding, slow dinosaur that for about 100 years people thought dinosaurs were these slow, swamp-dwelling, stupid animals that died out. And it really kind of changed things. So I'm going to let Tom jump in and go with the 100 and some characters that that unite birds and dinosaurs. You could probably rattle them off in 60 seconds or less.
Sure, although I'll do a different approach. So hi, I'm Dr. Tom Holtz from the University of Maryland. Scott mentioned Dr. John Ostrom of Yale, and I would be lax if I didn't point out he was actually my boss and professor when I was a graduate student back in the 1980s. And so, yeah, for a lot of people, the idea that birds are related to dinosaurs is sort of mind-numbing. But you have to remember, dinosaurs were really diverse, by which I mean there's lots of different forms. So don't think about Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus and Stegosaurus and Triceratops or even Tyrannosaurus when you're thinking about relationship to birds. Think about the little carnivorous dinosaurs. And it turns out many of those little carnivorous dinosaurs actually had a body covering of feathers, just like modern birds. They had a wishbone. In fact, even Tyrannosaurus rex has a wishbone. The only animals we know of in the world with wishbones in the modern world are birds. And in fact, it's impossible to draw a line where something stops being a dinosaur and starts being a bird. It just one into the next form, into the next form, into the next form, without any big jumps. So there's plenty of birds, for instance, that still had teeth in the Mesozoic, although modern birds don't have teeth. So we now recognize that birds are part of the dinosaur family tree, but there's this misconception that the chicken is the closest living relative to dinosaurs. And in fact, it's not just chickens. All birds, chickens, ostriches, hummingbirds, penguins, they're all descendants of dinosaurs. And in the modern style of classification we use in biology, you never stop being something. So there's still parts of dinosaurs, although they're also something else, which is birds. Just like a bat is still a type of mammal, even though it's distinct from all other mammals because it flies. And I see that there's a question up. What is the size of T-Rex, amount of teeth and size of the teeth? Well, this is from Carol Deutsch.
She's actually a teacher of a 6th grade class, and so it's a sixth grade student. And after you answer that, I'm going to pop over to Dave real quick because Dave wants to show a tooth.
Oh, excellent! So I'll say a little bit about the size of T-Rex, and then Dave could show the teeth. So T-Rex, how big is a T-Rex? How old is it? So an adult T-Rex is 12, 13 meters long, so up to 42 feet long. It's gigantic, about the length of a school bus. Its skull can be about 5 feet long, but every dinosaur that we know of came from an egg that's the size of a soccer ball or a 2-liter bottle of soda or smaller. So T-Rex was smaller than you when it was newborn, when it was newly hatched. And it had to live its life from that little baby all the way up to giants. So another way of thinking about it, T-Rex is an animal about the size of a killer whale, but walking around on land on these 2 giant legs. So I'll turn it over to Dave, and he could talk about T-Rex teeth.
Hello, so I'm Dr. Dave Hone at Queen Mary University in London. Like Tom, I do a lot of work, and like Scott, I do a lot of work on tyrannosaurs, but because I've actually been doing lots of stuff at home, I've got various of my dinosaur props with me, and one of which is a cast, not an original, but a copy of a T-Rex tooth. So when you're asking about how big they are, this is the answer. Now, this top bit is the tooth root, so that's the bit that sits in the jaw. But even so, that still leaves an enormous amount of tooth out, which is the actual, I've got it the wrong way around, the actual biting bit of the tooth. It's bigger than my head, pretty much. So their teeth are absolutely enormous. Tyrannosaurs, or at least the big tyrannosaurs, are very unusual in that their teeth are also really fat. Most dinosaurs this big would have teeth half this diameter or less. And as to how many they have different numbers. So the small early tyrannosaurs actually have quite a few teeth, and actually the biggest ones have the fewest teeth. So Tyrannosaurus Rex has, I want to say off the top of my head, 64 teeth. Tom may correct me, I'm right within 1 or 2, I know. Yeah. So 15, 16 each side up top, and about 14 each side down at the bottom.
Yeah.
And they have different types of teeth. This is the biggest tooth that they would have, pretty much. Towards the back of the jaw, they'd be much smaller, but still fat. And right at the front in the middle, they're a very funny, short, little flat tooth, which they use exclusively for feeding.
Mm-hmm. I should point out that Dr. Hone described a specimen of a duckbill from China, or from Mongolia, rather. It wasn't fed on by T-Rex, but it's fed on by T-Rex's close cousin called Tarbosaurus. And he showed that the bite marks on different parts of this upper arm bone showed the different sorts of teeth, the big side teeth and also those little scrapey front teeth. So they specialized in sort of feeding with different parts of their jaw and different parts of that meat that they were eating.
Hey guys, we've got a kiddo who wants to know if T-Rex got cavities.
I don't know if they did in that sense, but you do definitely see teeth with damage to them. I have one, and it's in my office, annoyingly. But a very common phenomena with tyrannosaurs is when they bite, their teeth our teeth meet. When they bite, their teeth go past each other. And it's actually really common to find teeth with grooves down the side that the other tooth has worn through the tooth as they've opened and closed their mouths. But that's not really the same as the kind of cavities we get, which are frankly most the result of eating sugar. And I don't think T-Rex had a lot of problem with that most of the time.
Also, with most dinosaurs, unlike humans, we get 2 sets of teeth. So we have our baby teeth, then we have our adult teeth. All dinosaurs shed their teeth throughout their whole life. So as they grow, a tooth falls out, another one comes in. So that's why dinosaur teeth are so common in these deposits, because you have thousands of dinosaurs on the landscape, each one of them shedding teeth throughout their whole life. So you tend to find tons of shed teeth out there. So if they got cavities, they just wait till that falls out and a new one comes.
I should mention, there are actually cases of fossils with cavities in them, but they're not from dinosaurs. And given the idea of that this PaleoFest is going to focus on the Ice Age, there's actually some early Ice Age bears that have been found that show cavities on their molars. And it's almost certainly showing when bears had shifted to becoming what we call omnivores, things that eat both meat and plants and so forth. And they're probably eating a lot of sweet stuff like berries and maybe honey some time of the year. And like us, we got to wash out. If we eat too much sweet stuff, we can get cavities.
Oh my goodness, guys, we've got another third grader asking us how sharp those teeth were. Because we're just chatting.
Not very.
Yeah.
Is the short answer. They're really quite fat and blunt.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
how did they utilize those teeth if they weren't sharp? Because I think a lot of our friends that are watching are used to the animals that bite having really the sharp teeth.
Yeah, I guess it's different things. You know, if you want to cut a steak, a knife is really good with a thin blade and serrations. But if you get your chisel out of the family toolbox and hit it hard enough, it'll go through the steak and the bone as well. Enough power turns the bluntest thing into a pretty effective tool for breaking stuff up.
Yeah. And if you look at Jane, the young T-Rex that's on display at the Burpee, its teeth are a lot more steak knife-like than the adult tooth that Dr. Hone was showing. But also Jane's jaws weren't as strong. So when they were younger, they did more sort of slicey bites. But when they got these gigantic, powerful jaw muscles, they didn't have to worry about slicing. They just, ripped out big chunks and tore it out and pulverized the meat. And we even, from the other end of the digestive system, there are fossilized poops of T-Rex called coprolites, but that just means poop stone, that have pulverized bone fragments in it. So they were just munching down on them and, digesting it. And, what survived went out the other end.
Actually, that's one of the things that kind of makes Tyrannosaurus Rex a little unique amongst some of the large theropod or meat-eating dinosaurs, is that it engaged in this process we call durophagy, which is eating bone, consuming bone as well. And recent studies show that Tyrannosaurus Rex had in excess of an 8,000-pound bite. You don't necessarily have to have sharp teeth to be an effective predator or carnivore. If you look at orca whales, if you look at crocodiles, they have conical teeth, and they grab a hold and rip off chunks and pulverize and hold fast. So you don't have to have super sharp Ginsu mouth teeth to be a good carnivore.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here real quick, and we're going to transition a little bit from dinosaurs and introduce Heidi Allen. Heidi is joining us from Australia. Is it Perth, Heidi? Is that where you're coming from? All right, she's from Perth, Australia, and PaleoFest, we tend to get dinosaur heavy, and I think that's because what we work on here. But paleontology includes all ancient life, everything living, the little guys to dinosaurs, of course. And Heidi works on some really old stuff. So Heidi, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much for having me. And I'm glad I got the tech working there. I had to quickly change computers, so I've missed the start. But thanks so much for having me. And I came in pretty heavy there with the dinosaur talk. So I'll just say straight up, I know nothing about dinosaurs. And all the kids in the audience there, I guarantee you will know more about dinosaurs than me. Because I don't work on dinosaurs at all. In fact, in Western Australia, the state in Australia where I live and work, there's only 3 dinosaur bones known that have ever been found, and they're all very, very small and incomplete dinosaur fossils. So there's not really a need for me to work on dinosaurs at all, being a paleontologist here in Western Australia. But what we do have a lot of is really old rocks. So the very, very oldest fossils in the world are found here in Western Australia. So that's the type of fossils that I work on. The oldest known fossil in the world is 3.5 billion years old. And that's a stromatolite fossil from the Pilbara region of Western Australia. So that's the type of fossil that I work on. And do I have time to keep talking? Should I explain what a stromatolite is? Yep. Okay, so stromatolites, for those of you that don't know, are the fossils of basically fossil slime. So they're built by microbial communities, and they're fossils that existed long before dinosaurs, long before fish, before any ediacaran fossils, long before most types of life that we learn about in paleontology. So for the first many billions of years, all we had was these wonderful fossils called stromatolites, and they're so beautiful and diverse. And I feel really lucky that I get to work on them. But I think we should all feel really lucky and grateful to the little old stromatolite, because actually what they did was give our atmosphere oxygen. So one of the things that we know is that to be alive, we need to have oxygen. And before there were stromatolites on Earth, the atmosphere had hardly any oxygen, and in fact would have been very toxic to most of the things that came after it. So things like dinosaurs. And so we owe our life on this planet, but also all of the fossils that we love to work on, all of these ice age wonderful fossils, and the dinosaurs and fossil fish and ammonites and the ediacaran fauna, they all relied on oxygen, and we wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for these really old fossils.
Fantastic.
That's my plug for stromatolites.
I want to introduce one more paleontologist. Dr. Spencer Heller is joining us. Spencer, tell us a little about yourself and what you're working on. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Yeah, so my name is Spencer Hellert, and I work at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. I work on a lot of different animals. So mainly what I'm interested in is how some things can't evolve and how they can evolve really quickly sometimes. So a bunch of different parts of yourself are connected, and that can be because they're connected through the same gene or through the same function that you have in your body. And because they're really, really connected, that means that one part of your body can't really change without the other part of your body changing along with it if they're very connected by the same genes, same development, or same function. And so this is a totally fake example, but I like using it because it helps to visualize what's going on. When I say that things are connected, let's pretend that the same gene, right? And your genes are like the directions that make you. So if that same gene controlled whether or not you have a head and how big your feet are. And for some reason, it would be really great if you had big feet. So if you evolved big feet, you also don't have a head. And you can't live without a head. So therefore, you can never, ever evolve big feet. So that's an example of one way that you can't evolve because different parts of you are connected really tightly together. And so to study that, I have looked at a bunch of different animals. I've worked on dinosaurs a little, and I actually met Josh working on dinosaurs. I got to go on digs with Scott and Josh, so it was really fun. Then I worked on birds for quite a bit. I've also worked on beetles, and most recently I worked on mammal ancestors. So since we talked a lot about dinosaurs and some bird stuff, I'll go into some mammal ancestors.
Oh, you even had a comment. Somebody is saying, yes, mammals, please.
Mammals, please. Mammals are great. So mammal ancestors are really interesting because I don't have a picture to show you right away, but I'll try and find one in a minute. They look really crazy. They look like not mammals. They look more like reptiles. And sometimes they look like if a crocodile and a hippopotamus had a baby. They look really crazy. And there's a lot of evolution happening between really early mammals and us, the mammals that are around today. And part of that is in their backbones and in their arms. So I work on the arm evolution of early mammals and mammal ancestors because mammals can do a lot of really cool stuff with their arms that other animals can't do. So as a group, mammals can fly with their arms like bats. We can climb trees. We can hop around like kangaroos on our legs, and kangaroos can use their arms to like punch other kangaroos and do all kinds of crazy stuff. We can use our hands to write and swing on monkey bars and do all kinds of stuff. And as a group, we can do a lot more with our arms and legs than a lot of other animals can. And so I want to know, why is that? And we think that maybe it has something to do with how mammal backbones evolved and kind of allowed our arms to do all of this crazy cool stuff. And so to study that, what I do is I take 3D scans of fossils from all over the world. So in my job, I'm really lucky that I get to travel a lot, go to a lot of different museums, and I take 3D scans of the fossils, and then I have to change the shape of the fossil into math. And so basically all you're doing is you're putting little dots all over the picture of the bone that you have, and then you turn those dots into math, and then you can study shape that way. And then another thing I'm starting to work on now is hearing evolution in mammals. So I bet you don't know this, but in mammals, the lower jaw really only has one bone on each side. But in reptiles, the lower jaw is made up of a ton of different bones. And what happened with mammals is that a lot of those bones got smaller and they migrated back. And then eventually they detached from the lower jaw altogether and became part of the ear. So we can hear really well because of those little tiny bones that are now in our ear. And it's really cool and interesting that they detached from the lower jaw. And mammals are the only animals that really do that. And so we're trying to figure out why that is too. So why are all these little bones really connected evolutionarily, and they kind of change altogether, but they're disconnected from the jawbone that we have today. And that disconnection sort of allowed our ears to be awesome and have all of those little bones. And so again, to study that, we go all around the world taking 3D images of these little tiny jaw bones and ear bones, and then we turn their shape into math to figure that out.
All right, let's get to some. We got a bunch of questions coming in. So,
Thank you, Spencer.
Yes, thank you, Spencer.
No problem.
I'm going to jump back a little while. We had a student asking about how long a brontosaurus's neck was.
Well, I'm gonna try to get that up for us. I got it. Yeah, go for it.
Would you like to feel that, Dr. Hohn?
Yeah, I can have a go. So Brontosaurus is one of the long-necked dinosaurs, unsurprisingly called the sauropods. I can't tell you the exact number off the top of my head, but having seen the original specimen in the Carnegie Museum, I can tell you it's probably in the range of about 6-7 meters long, which is obviously extraordinary. But if we're talking about sauropod neck lengths, Brontosaurus isn't even kind of halfway. So there's a group that's found particularly in China called the Mamenchisaurs, so another part of the sauropod group. And the biggest, so we've got a couple of really good, very well preserved, almost complete mid-sized Mamenchisaurus, but there's a couple of big isolated bones from what appear to be very large individuals. And the estimates for those guys is a neck of 13 meters long. That's on an animal that's probably 27, 28 meters long, including the tail. So more than half that animal is neck, even when you include the fact that this is an animal with a really long tail at the end. So Brontosaurus is really cool, and it's got a really long neck, but it is almost nowhere in the long neck stakes of the big sauropods.
That's awesome.
All right, we got another question. What is the largest flightless bird fossil you've discovered, and what is the most rare birds? Well,
I think, not that I discovered it or anything, but the largest flightless bird fossils ever discovered by weight are probably a contest between the elephant birds of ancient Madagascar, but not particularly that ancient. I mean, they overlapped with human beings. And then there's a group, the drome ornithids from Australia, which also got really, really, really big. And the problem is when you get, in most cases, fossils are incomplete. And it's rare that the most complete fossils are also the biggest individuals. So we have to figure out, based on more complete small individuals, the basic shape, and then we have incomplete giant individuals. We have to sort of fill in the gaps to figure out the size and therefore the weight. But I'm trying to remember what the weight estimates are on something like Apiornis or half a ton, something like that. I can't remember offhand. They're massively big, but nowhere near as big as their extinct relatives, the non-bird dinosaurs.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Here's another question from a first grader. They want to know what the biggest dinosaur and what the smallest dinosaur was. Maybe we could go non-dinosaur too and talk about other prehistoric.
Okay, for the biggest dinosaur, for exactly the same problems I talked about with birds, we don't have good complete skeletons of the biggest. I could say the biggest dinosaur was a sauropod, and that would be absolutely correct. And then beyond that, though, what type of sauropod? We have these bits and pieces of a bunch of supergiants. There are some titanosaurs like Argentinosaurus, which are just huge, like maybe 50 to 80 tons, maybe more. So the mass of a fin whale. But there's also a specimen of Apatosaurus from Colorado that's not been described much in the literature, but reported that might be the same size. There's a neck bone of a dinosaur called Barosaurus, which is this long-necked relative of Diplodocus, which might be the same size scale, but we only have one bone from it. So I think we could say the sizes sort of max out around 80 to maybe 100 at most metric tons. But that's really big. That's the size of a herd of elephants.
Yeah.
So that's it for the
like
biggest.
non-comprehensible.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to dive in on the small ones because I'm one of the co-authors on a description of one of the smallest dinosaurs. So there's a whole little group called the Alvarezsaurs, mostly from South America and Asia and a few in Europe. And these guys were tiny, like this kind of length, a foot, 30 centimeters from the tip of the nose to the tip of the tail. So quite a long-tailed animal. So stud maybe this high. So the same basic shape as T-Rex and Velociraptor and all the others, but yay big. And they're maybe 150 grams kind of size. And there's 3 or 4 of them that are all about the same size. And these were actually probably anteaters and insect eaters. So tiny little fluffy, feathery, half chicken-sized dinosaurs were the smallest adults that we know of.
Wow.
I'm actually going to jump back to Heidi real quick.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump back to Australia real quick with Heidi. Clearly, obviously, we've talked about dinosaurs a lot here, and
that's okay. I actually was going to jump in before when we were talking about the largest dinosaurs, because although I said Western Australia only has 3 dinosaur bones described from it, we actually have wonderful trackways, dinosaur trackways up in Broome. And just to give some of the kids out there an idea for size, so I have actually seen some of those trackways. I've not published on them because I work on these older fossils, but I've been to the sites, and some of the trackways up there, some of the individual footprints of the dinosaurs are so large that my 10-year-old son lying down can fit completely inside of it. So that gives you some idea of how big these sauropods were going across the sand to make just individual footprints the whole size of probably the kids that are listening here. They're enormous. But yes, did you have a question about really old fossils?
Well, I was actually curious. If anybody's interested in dinosaurs from Australia, Dr. Salisbury will be speaking tomorrow at PaleoFest. However, I know dinosaurs are relatively rare in Australia. What working with the Geologic Survey over there, what are the more common fossils you find? Clearly, with microbialites, which you work on, but in Australia in general, what are the more common fossils that you find?
Probably, we've got a lot of quite famous fossil sites within Australia. So because I work for a state geological survey, I just work on fossils within Western Australia. So we have mostly Proterozoic rocks, so they're all quite old. But we do have some Ediacaran age rocks, and I do work on some material from that as well. So I guess if we look at Australia as a whole, it's not fair to say we don't have dinosaurs in Australia, because we certainly do, but just not in the state where I am. So Queensland and Victoria have some really nice dinosaur sites, and I have many friends that went on to work on those. But yeah, so we have dinosaurs, and probably one of our most famous sites would be Ediacaran Hills, where the Ediacaran biota is described from. So they're a really wonderful example of some very early complex life. So I said that I work on these really old fossils, microbialites, which are quite interesting at the moment, because that's the type of life that NASA are looking for on Mars. So astrobiologists and people looking at the fossils I work on are all very excited about that. But Australia also has that wonderful fossil side of the Ediacaran biota, and it's just a really interesting thing to look up. There's lots of information online. If kids and teachers want to look it up after this session, you can have a look at some of the pictures and the reconstructions, and really they're so wonderful because it's such a bizarre world. There's just nothing like it alive today. And, you know, they're just these wonderful fossils that are preserved so beautifully. So that's, and we also have a lot of, you know, Cenozoic sites as well. So we've got Riversley and a lot of cave systems where we have fossils too. So look, I think Australia is a wonderful place because we're lucky. We also have lots of great Paleozoic sites. So the thing about Australia is that it's such a large place, and it's so sparsely populated that we really are lucky that what I love about being a paleontologist, and what I try and express to kids and anybody I talk to, is that here in Australia, you really have the opportunity to make discoveries. You know, it's just a wonderful field to get into if you want to make a contribution to science. There's still so much we don't know. And I think the majority of fossils in Australia are yet to be properly described. I think, you know, if I was to be honest, I would say less than 15% of the things in our collection actually have a name on it. So it's a really wonderful place to work.
Opportunity for students.
I see there's a question that's definitely sort of in Heidi's realm by Emily Freiberger. Is there a relationship between the oxygen-giving algae of today and the fossils of the slime that have been found?
So
I think they're thinking about the stromatolite fossils and the relationship to modern oxygen-giving algae.
Yes, right. Okay, sure. So, yes, so our understanding of where the oxygen in the atmosphere came from was by stromatolites photosynthesizing. So I like to explain stromatolites as being the trees of the Proterozoic. So if we look at the geological time scale, really old rocks are called Proterozoic rocks. And we know that trees and plants didn't evolve until relatively young, so much later than the Proterozoic. But during the Proterozoic, we had all of these microbialites, so fossil stromatolites and other forms related to those, and they would photosynthesize just like trees do today. So the exact same pathway was happening where they're using sunlight for energy, and the oxygen is being released as a waste product. So it's a byproduct. So it is exactly the same system that many things photosynthesize today. So if you go and have a look in river or pond scum, quite often if you look very closely, you can see tiny bubbles within that mat, and that's the oxygen. That's the oxygen that the slime or the microbial mat is producing. And this is the system that was happening back in the Proterozoic, and what gave us all of the oxygen in our atmosphere that we have today.
Cool.
Did that answer that question?
Well, I think so.
We have a mammal question, which I'm going to throw to Spencer, considering she's our in the panel, the current paleomammologist. So we had someone ask, what is the oldest mammal that we know of? And is that really a fair question to ask, or can you tell us more?
It's a good question. First, to answer that, I guess you have to figure out what is a mammal. So the mammals, when you learn in school, we all have hair, we produce milk, and we give birth to live babies, right? Except not everybody. So there are still two kinds of mammals, echidnas and platypuses, that are in Australia. And my husband's from Australia, and every time we go there, it's my goal to find an echidna. And I'm always echidna aware, but I've yet to find one. Anyway, those guys lay eggs. So they're still kind of like their ancestors, where they don't have live births, they're laying eggs. And also, they don't have like nipples even for where the milk comes out of. They have milk just sort of leaks out of their skin, and the babies lick it off, which is weird for us to think about. So we have those crazy mammals, but then how far do you go back to sort of being more reptile-y, where you decide it's not a mammal anymore? So I can't remember exactly when the first mammal comes about, but it's the same time as dinosaurs. So while the dinosaurs are walking around, so are these small early mammals. And before you get to mammals, their ancestors still are not the same thing as reptiles. They're all within this group called synapsids. So they're not mammals yet, but they're the ancestors of mammals. They're not dinosaurs, they're not reptiles either. But a lot of them kind of look dinosaur-ish, and a couple of them tend to sneak into dinosaur books for kids all the time, especially these big peleosaurs. And they are it's basically a big lizard with a big sail on its back. So if you're ever flipping through a dinosaur book and you see a big lizard with a sail on its back that's on 4 legs, that's actually not a dinosaur. That is a thing that eventually its babies and babies and babies and babies are going to be mammals. And how we tell those apart is that all things that are mammals and mammal ancestors have just one hole in their heads. And other things like dinosaurs have 2 holes behind their eyes. And our hole in our head for mammals is right at our temple. So all the kids in the classroom, you can put your hands on your temple and chew a little bit, and you feel the muscle go up and down, and that's where that hole is in your head. So I bet you didn't know you had an extra hole in there, but you do. And those guys, the earliest things that are leading up to mammals happened way before dinosaurs. So we always think of the extinction that killed off the dinosaurs, right, with the big asteroid. And then before dinosaurs, there was an even bigger mass extinction that killed almost everything on the earth. And these things that are gonna be mammals, mammal ancestors, started even before that. And somehow they snuck through that big extinction, and then they became mammals eventually during dinosaurs, and then we snuck through the dinosaur mass extinction, and now we're awesome and running all over the earth today.
How are we doing on time, Ian?
You know, we're running really short. We probably need to get towards the wrap up, but I'm here just scanning the comments. Just so many really great questions, and I'm sad that we're not able to get to them. You know,
I'll jump to one more. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Scott. A 3rd grader wants to ask, how long does it take to excavate a dinosaur?
Well, that's a good question. How long does it take to excavate a dinosaur? It kind of depends on a lot of variables, a lot of different things. How big is the dinosaur? How complete is the dinosaur? What sort of rock is it in? If the rock is very hard, if it's in a very cemented rock that's basically, so imagine this fist that I have right here is a sand particle, and my other fist is a sand particle. What's holding those sand particles together? What sort of glue? Is it quartz? Is it more sand? That's going to make it really hard. If it's a different mineral, it might make it softer, but if it's really hard, and you have to use jackhammers and pneumatic or air-powered tools, it may take a long time to get that dinosaur out. If it's something like we would find in the Hell Creek Formation, so that's the formation that Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops comes out of, often those rocks are softer. There are mudstones, soft sandstones, things like that. We can use, basically, I don't know if you can see this here, like small awls and picks to remove the sediment on there. In the case of Jane, the juvenile T-Rex at the Burpee Museum, Jane took a little over 7 total weeks to excavate completely out. In the case of the Hanksville Burpee Quarry, excavations are continuing there because there's so many bones and they're so spread out that there will be bones at that site for years to come. So it depends. It honestly depends. If it's a small dinosaur, like Dave was talking about earlier, it could be a couple of days, depending on, again, what sort of rock it's in. So that's a very long-winded answer to say it depends.
So just diving in. So those alvarezsaurs I mentioned before, and one of them that I've helped describe called Linhanicus, when that little thing was found, the nature of the preservation, this is in a desert in northern China, the bones were basically free of rock. They were just on the surface in sand, and literally all we did was pick them up and put them in a box. That was it.
Wow.
It took minutes between 2 or 3 people. 2 years. So yeah, that's the answer.
Really quickly too, there's it can take forever, but also like Josh will know about this because he got to go to Antarctica, and that usually when you dig up fossils, you kind of get them out of the dirt as much as you can, and then you put a cast over them so that they're protected and you can take them to the museum. But in Antarctica, it's too cold to put that cast on. And so what Josh and others had to do is that and also the rock is really, really hard. So sometimes you just literally have to blow up the rock with the dinosaur inside, and you just put the rocks in boxes and take it home and then get them out later.
Yeah, at the Antarctica site, we needed gas-powered jackhammers to basically quarry around where we believe the fossil to be. It's Cryolophosaurus. If you students are familiar with Cryolophosaurus, it's this relatively large body meat-eating theropod that Dr. Bill Hammer described from Antarctica 20 years ago or so. But that rock is hands down, and Spencer probably you too, the hardest rock I've ever worked on. And when that grant ran out, I love the dinosaur, but I wasn't sad to not work on it. Literally, it took one block I worked on, took me 2 years, and I think that block I pulled out maybe 3 bones, which was a tibia and fibula, which is and some other smaller ones. But it was I'd use my medic tool, and the tip of the bit would shear off within seconds sometimes, so I'd have to consistently sharpen it. So yeah, thankfully the rock in this case was very hard and it protected the bones. But yeah,
sounds like operator error to me.
Yeah. Maybe if I had a better teacher.
Oh.
Yeah. So fortunately, you're right. You're not, plaster of Paris is not going to set up at negative 30, 40 degrees Celsius temperatures. So yeah, we were fortunate there. The rock is super hard. Until you get back to the lab, then it's not so fortunate. So.
Well, we're actually ending our time here. So I know a lot of you kiddos need to get back into your classes and your schedules. So first and foremost, I want to thank you all for attending. The Burpee Museum is so exciting. I hope you're coming back to us when we open. We will be opening soon. But in the meantime, I also want to thank everyone that was here as our speakers. The forum kind of went in its own way as led by the questions, which was an interesting organic route. And I enjoyed that. So thank you guys for being flexible on this.
Mm-hmm.
If
no worries.
Who's ever here right now, if you can join us again in another hour for the next session,
yep.
If you can't, I understand, but we'll see you guys. Okay. What time is it, Heidi?
It's midnight. 5 to midnight.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you so much. So
it's a Friday night.
yeah, get some rest. We'll see you tomorrow. And we have some pre-recorded bits that we can play. So if all of you aren't able to come, we can also do some of the pre-recorded pieces. So we'll have plenty of content, but I hope to see you back because you guys were phenomenal for answering all these cool questions that the kids came up with. All right, guys, thanks so much. I'm going to end the broadcast shortly. So I'm going to start pulling you guys out of the main screen, and we'll see you when we see you soon.
See you shortly.
Bye.
Yeah. All right.
Bye.
Thanks again, Heidi. Bye, Scott. Bye, Josh. All right, guys, I'm just going to let the broadcast run for a few more minutes because we are on a bit of a delay, so I want to make sure it all gets wrapped up. So as I'm ending, I do want to say a couple of things. Number one, there were some awesome questions that we didn't get to. We will attempt to put those answers in the chat when we have a moment. If you come back at 11, we'll probably address some of the questions from this session, as well as new questions that you guys may have. The other thing I want to say is that this weekend is PaleoFest online. So no matter where in the world you are, you have access to some cool stuff. It is a live interface that once you're in, you'll have several different icons on the side. You can click on the home screen to go to reception. You can click on Interact at Burpee, and there are 4 or 5 different rooms you can go in with live Burpee staff members and other sorts of folks and volunteers that are sharing. And then there's a whole activity booth section, and you can go to all the different activity booths. Many of those are self-guided and self-paced. Some of them are actual games, so you can, make choices, click on buttons, and learn about everything from, hunting during the Ice Age all the way to microfossils, all the way over to what makes a fossil, and a lot of other really cool stuff. So I look forward to seeing you guys. Have a great day. Thanks so much. Thanks for all your support to Burpee. Bye.